Good evening, treasure seekers. It's Blake coming to you live from New Mexico, and joining me as always from Washington State, it's Bryn and Cody. How's it going, guys?
Hello, hello. I'm sitting here as the intro music was playing. I'm thinking about, wow, it's already so hot in our house, and it's only April. I'm just starting to think about every time spring summer comes around, I just get desperate for air conditioning. So we're in a bad spot if I'm already thinking that right now.
No
Uh,
AC.
anyways, anyways,
We
things are
always get
good.
a we always break and get a quote for an AC system and like end of August, and then we get the numbers back a couple weeks later, and then we're always like, it's already like September now. Let's just wait. It's not even hot anymore, and we've done that like the last 3 years in a row.
All right,
It's like
everybody has to help us find a treasure so that you guys can pay for your AC.
It's like the one time I purged all like the winter clothes in my closet during the summer. Like I haven't worn these in forever. Ah,
All right, heat wave. Nice.
I mean, that's the problem is it's not hot. Maybe it was in the 60s today. How are you, Blake?
Good, good. Just getting back from a number of travels. No boots on the ground,
Yes.
unfortunately, but I know I'm behind on responding to a bunch of emails and discords, so I will be getting to those over the next week. So if you guys have sent me anything, audience, my apologies for not being able to respond. So I will respond to everything this week.
I was also traveling, also not boots on the ground, but I will say I splurged and purchased the onboard Wi-Fi on my flight, and it was very productive because I did a lot of treasure hunting, which I think I was just very focused and in the zone because there wasn't really anything else I could do.
Mhm.
And I feel like I made a lot of progress on my flight, which was very
Okay,
exciting.
excellent.
So,
Pokemon
yeah, it was
box.
Pokemon box. Yes, sir. It was some good, uninterrupted treasure hunting.
Nice. You didn't let the next passenger overlook at all your notes, did you?
I actually had the thought, I thought, wow, I hope the person behind isn't looking over my shoulder because I'm looking up some good stuff right now. As if the person behind me happens to also be working on the Pokemon box.
Never know. Gotta keep you on your toes.
I know, I know.
All right. No news today, right?
No news.
No news. So should we just dive right into my notes are missing. What do we do first? Oh, horseshoes and hand grenades.
Wow, look what happens when we go to one show a week.
Falling apart.
Cody, you got horseshoes and hand grenades today, right?
I do, yeah.
Nice.
It always catches me off guard when there's no news and I have horseshoes and hand grenades. It always feels like horseshoes and hand grenades is like halfway through the episode, and all of a sudden it's like 2 minutes in, and I'm on the spot. I just got some feedback.
He just did
I
it.
know I did. Bryn was filling me in that there's been a lot of comments about me doing ahs and ums a lot. So if I'm choppy during this segment, it's because that's very much on the front of my mind, and I'm going to try not to ah and very much.
Wow. Okay.
I was just looking into I was just looking in to see where the nearest Toastmasters is. Maybe I need to do some. Maybe I need to do some formal training to try and get rid of some of these ahs and ums. I'm very self conscious now.
Sorry, sorry. I do. I mean, I think it's. I don't know how you remedy that, but um, I don't know if it's probably a good thing to work on.
You got
Yes,
about
I'm
a
glad you.
hundred. You got about 100 topics you could give to Toastmasters. Just these random solves that you have.
All right. Yeah, no, I'm glad everyone's brought it to my attention so I can work on bettering myself and bettering my speaking. I think I get going too fast, and then my brain and my mouth get disconnected. and then I just fill in the gap with some ah. All right, let's
kick
dive
us
right
off.
into it
Kick us off.
and try not to break into laughter the first time I give a little ah.
Okay.
Everything's fine.
So this, ooh, I almost did it right there. This Horseshoes and Hand Grenades was sparked because of a Reddit post that I read a few weeks ago. It had to do with the past and future box and the word search. And in this Reddit post, this is tough. In the Reddit post, they were talking about going around the word search like a clock and changing out in this particular post. They said O's and E's, changing them to ones and zeros every time that they came up, and then each ring around the outside perimeter or the perimeter of the word search, counting those I's and E's as ones and zeros, became like a binary digit. This got me really excited. They were very cryptic about it at the beginning. You know, there's a lot of posts that say, hey, let me give you all a hint. Here's something that's very good. And then you actually like finally go through the motions of doing it and kind of lackluster. This was one of those occasions for me, but I got very excited about it. And then in the process of doing it, I ended up thinking, you know, I like the idea behind it. We've talked about, I think there's a lot of potential still in the word search for more stuff to be hidden. So far, all of the things that I'm kind of bought into as like correct in my mind still leaves a lot of room for like manipulation of things as you're creating the puzzle. We've talked about, you know, the turning of the arc in the Joyce Serenade poem. We've talked about lilac solution or lilac illusion. Um, so I like the idea of going around in rings. It feels like a unique solution within, like, to kind of to complement some of the other solutions in the word search. So I took that idea, ended up kind of diving in a little deeper because I didn't like the I's and E's. Um, um, so I tried to find other, I started by trying to find other combinations of two letters that I could convert to ones and zeros and then see if then, you know, written out separately, they could become binary digits. So Blake, if you want to pull up the, this is tough.
It's okay. You're doing very well.
If you want to pull up the picture that I sent you called Clock,
Clock.
I'll talk through that one real quick, which is kind of my first step and the step that I did in Excel.
Mm-hmm.
You may need to zoom into the top ones because it's kind of one at a time here. So I started by the top one just shows the kind of base word search as I had it in Excel. And then I've highlighted, I really limited it to 4 rings because I didn't want to get, you know, dive in too much too early, and 4 rings kind of seems like enough where you could be like, get kind of a proof of concept. Mm-hmm. So I took those 4 rings, and the section below on this picture here shows where I counted for all of the letters A through Z for each of those rings. I counted how many instances of that letter shows up in that ring. Okay. So you'll see that like there's 4 A's in the green ring, 4 A's in the blue ring, 2 A's in the purple ring, 3 A's in the orange ring, and then a sum at the bottom that adds to 13. So I started by doing that. And then I thought, okay, if we're going to convert these to binary, I'm going to assume it's like a simpler, and I should give a huge disclaimer that I'm not an expert at any of this stuff, but this is kind of just me working through my understanding of some of this. So I was thinking it's probably going to be 8-bit binary. So that means that the sum of the 2 letters that I pick for each ring needs to equal 8 or 16. And then later on, I also decided it could maybe equal 4, and like you'd use it for 2 rings to equal 1 binary letter. Okay. But kind of macroscopically, my thought process at this point was it needs to be divisible by 8. The combination of the 2 letters needs to be divisible by 8 so that you can make an 8-bit binary character out of that. Mm-hmm. So then expanding on that, I decided I'm going to take all 4. I believe I did all 4 at this point. I either did 3 or 4, either green, blue, pink, or green, blue, pink, and orange. and I summed up the total number that each letter shows up in those 4 rings, and then combined every possible combination of one letter and another letter, summed those up, and then if it was divisible by, I believe in this case I was still working on 8. If it was divisible by 8, I said, okay, this is a possible instance where you'd get where you could possibly get like an 8-bit binary character out of each of the 4 rings. So if you scroll down below, this was kind of the outcome of it. So you'll notice it's obviously mirrored because the order of which letter doesn't matter. But a combination of C and D, combination of G and O, and a combination of H and N. I think also there's R and H. Each of those combinations kind of fulfilled those criteria. So I spot checked a couple of those, didn't come up with anything good. And then I thought, okay, I also want to expand this even a bit more, because right now I'm limiting myself to a combination of 2 letters. So like in the original post, the person had changed out I's and E's for 1s and 0s. And I thought, what if it's a 3-letter word or a 4-letter word that each of the letters in those 3 or 4 letters, the 3 or 4-letter word gets changed out for 1s and 0s. So I wanted to expand on that a little bit more. And I should also back up a step here and say, I don't think that what I'm doing would be sequentially what you're supposed to do. In my mind, this is skipping a step. I think I've talked about that on one of my previous solve attempts. It's like, I think that if this were to be correct, there would be a middle step that I'm trying to skip, where you'd like come up with a keyword that you'd plug in.
Okay.
And I'm trying to backwards engineer what that keyword would be if this was how you were supposed to solve it. So if you want to open up the next picture called Python, this is where I got into Python, and I will issue a 10 times bigger disclaimer at this point, because I do very little like coding or anything like that or getting in Python. I just know enough to like install it and install all the other programs you need to do anything with it. Just enough to get myself in trouble. But the good news is, the first picture here is actually me running my kind of Python script that I came up with, and using the same criteria that I did in Excel, and then getting the same answer. So that made me feel really good about like this probably being correct.
Okay.
So what I did is I created a script that takes a handful of kind of user inputs. The first thing is the number of strings, which are alphabetic strings so each string that I enter is the letters in each of those loops around the word search. So at different times I tried different numbers of strings. In most cases, I either did 3 or 4. So you'll see in the first instance here, I'm saying, okay, let's check the first 3 loops around the outside of the word search. And then I enter what the letters are in the loops around the word search. Then the next thing is I ask myself in this case for a keyword length. So you'll see in the top one, it's like I said, it's the exact same thing I did in Excel, only now in Python, where I'm saying, we're going to look for 2 unique letters that meet these criteria. And then in this case, I use a divisor of 4. So I'm basically saying you could get half a binary digit out of each loop around the word search, or a full binary digit too. It's as long as the divisor, as long as the modulus of the divisor is 0 and the divisor is 4. I don't know. I sound I know just enough to get myself in trouble. Anyway, so I did that, and then I played around with a couple of different inputs. So in the next one down, I tried keyword length of 4 and a divisor of 8, and then all 4 strings. Okay. So in this case, I got 3 results. So letters, in each case, the letters A, N, and T were included. So either A, N, T, and B, A, N, T, and W, or A, N, T, and Y were the possible combinations of 4-letter words that for every, if you sum up all those letters for every ring in the word search, the sum is divisible by 8. So you could hypothetically or theoretically get a binary digit or 2 binary digits out of each loop around. Then I did the same thing with a keyword length of 5, and I got a handful more. And then I tried to increase that keyword length, and it would not let me. And I don't know enough about programming to override that. But Python spit it back at me and said, "No, that's too much." Essentially, because like this is obviously increasing exponentially, right? Like the number of digits that every single one has to match with every single other one. Now you're looking at 6, and it's
a lot of combinations.
Too much. Yeah, so, exactly. It's a lot of combinations. So then I spot checked. I spot checked to make sure it was correct on a couple of these, and it looked like it was all correct. And then at this point, again, I'm trying to skip a step and work backwards. So I'm figuring the letters need to be to anagram to a word. So then I took a lot of the 5s, the letters that got spit out for keyword length of 5, and tried to see if any of those would anagram to a word that would be an actual keyword that would like be my previous step to what I'm now trying to skip. And I couldn't really come up with much. So I'm not feeling great about this being the correct solution, but it's another one where I kind of like the idea. I still feel like there could be something in the word search that has to do with like rotating around the word search. And I'll be the first to admit that, like I said, I'm trying to skip a step. I'm probably making things harder on myself than they need to be, but the chances of finding the treasure, I feel like, are 1 in a million. Someone's gonna have to go out on a limb, right? Someone's gonna have to go out on a limb and find something interesting. So I was throwing a little Hail Mary here.
Yeah, I think this is go ahead.
I was just gonna say that, first of all, I'm so lost. Are you saying that you think whatever the passcode, the word that you would be looking for would be 5 characters specifically?
I'm checking for different links. So I checked everything from 2 to 5, and I couldn't check any more than that because it becomes exponentially difficult for the program to run that many different combinations.
Okay. Continue. I think my brain kind of shut down partway through this. I'm not tracking.
Right. I'm not doing a great job of explaining it.
No, this is just not my brand of tea.
This is Past and Future box is not for you.
That's fine.
So basically you're looking in these rings for different letter combinations that add up to divisible by 8 in order to do the conversion of these letter sets to 1s and 0s to try to spell out some sort of word. And like Cody's saying, he's skipping a step which may be identification of a word or combination of letters that might give you a hint to which letters you're supposed to convert using this method. And so he's trying to brute force it. He's trying to brute force it a little bit to get to the answer ahead of time rather than finding what the keyword is to do the letter conversions into binary. So
exactly.
So yeah,
you did a much better job of explaining it. But like, yeah, if this spit out an anagram of like, this would be an obvious one, but say it spit out an anagram of like the word oasis.
Yeah.
I'd be like, oh, dang, I'm going to go back and check that now. The idea would not be that it was JCB's intent for you to ever do this, but I'm trying to, like we've said a couple times, skip a step, brute force it, trying to work backwards.
Right.
So
I'm
still playing around with it a little bit, but
you never did get enough information from the original poster that supposedly got some information out of a binary conversion to see.
The last time I checked that post, they said they got 5 characters. They never revealed what those 5 characters were, but one of the users said, hey, I tried this and got these 5 characters. And then the original poster said, and this was like months ago at this point, or not months ago, probably 3 weeks ago. So I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but I think the original poster said like, oh, you got the first 4 correct, but the last one isn't. And the first 4 was like open parentheses 8 star K. And it's like, all right, I don't think that is what he wants us to do.
Okay.
But you always get those posts that they're like, I've solved something critical.
Right. Okay. Well,
Well,
this is
So
it's kind of cool. Like I like the ring idea because of the physical bitcoins with like the binary around.
yeah.
Sorry, I'm probably saying just such stupid things right now. But originally it's like, oh, ring theme, ring in the word search, but I guess that wouldn't really apply here. Um, but I do like that it's a whole different way of divvying up the word search itself in a way that doesn't feel like unreasonable. Um, and it does seem like that could be a different way for JCB to encode something.
yeah, particularly if it's some sort of spiral pattern or ring structure like this. I mean, closest thing we've got is the lilac cipher, right? The Pac-Man illusion, the lilac illusion, which came up with something interesting, certainly. But if there's another way we can use that, because the lilac one that we found, the 19 tray or try a 19, is certainly compressed within the middle section of this, and it would be nice to use more of the word search for that. I think the problem we go back to is that it's a 15 by 20 grid, which isn't as conducive to, something that was 15 by 15 or 20 by 20 that's more symmetrical. But certainly there could be something there. So yeah, this is a good deep dive. I like it, even if it's truly a horseshoe or hand grenade.
Does that spiral pattern play into like, remember the old school snake game?
Mm-hmm.
Was there ever a point where the snake like spiraled, or was that always just more sporadic?
No,
you
yeah.
had to spiral as you got to the end, so you didn't eat your own tail.
Yep.
That's right.
Well,
yeah.
I would have explained this a lot better if I wasn't so worried about the ahs and ums, but I think I cut out a lot of ahs and ums that time.
Yeah.
You did a good job.
That was great.
Thank you.
That's great. All right. So yeah,
Toastmaster who?
If listeners have listeners have other clues or ideas towards this approach, I mean, it might be on the side of you don't have to be a genius, but like you're saying, if it's actually skipping a step to brute force this, and there's something more obvious there, all ears on that, certainly. But yeah, super interesting. Thank you, Cody. All right. Any other comments or questions, Bryn?
I don't think I have anything intelligent to add. I appreciate your work on that, Cody. Thank you.
You just got to make some of the Pokemon box paragraphs into this. Then we'll get your attention. All right, should we go into mailbag? Right. Not that one. This one.
Mailbag. We've got mail.
Bryn,
all right.
You're in charge.
I think you're still sharing my picture, at least on my screen here.
Get it out of here. Not in my segment. Like Blake said, we have been a little behind in the inbox, so I apologize. But I've, in a few instances, tried to go in and get through some chunks as I can. And there has been some really great stuff in the inbox. And so I wanted to make sure that we could share a few nuggets that people have been emailing in. So I have 3 that I will share today. Pretty quick. So I'll start with Ilene. I think there's been a couple times now, especially in kind of the end of the book, when we're talking about the acknowledgements, that like pick and shovel icon showed up on the very final page. We also have the pick and shovel icon on the cover of the book. So it kind of continues to show up here and there. And I know we mentioned it, maybe it was me. It drives me a little bit crazy because he says, hey, don't do anything like dangerous and crazy, which I feel like an ice pick kind of is a little too adventurous for that sentiment. And also the shovel, because he says the treasures are not buried. So it just felt like a very incorrect icon to be using throughout the book.
Maybe it's not buried, it's just entombed, and we have to spend 2 years with a pick to get rid of a boulder.
It's good foreshadowing,
So-
Cody.
So Ilene wrote in and mentioned the pick and shovel icon is associated with rock and mineral clubs. So that seems pretty interesting because of obviously we have all this rock and mineral talk throughout the book. And I know that that was clearly something that JCB mentions that he was personally having to like learn and educate himself on as he was acquiring these treasures and learning about the treasures. So that kind of seemed like a personal journey that he was going on to kind of educate himself for this book. And so it does seem like there could easily be more to that icon than maybe what I'm initially finding frustration with. So that seemed very noteworthy, and I wanted to pass that along because I've seen some discussion on Discord as well about people being confused with that icon.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. Phil wrote in, just going to read his email here in chapter 12. So chapter 12 was the massive gold rush nugget. We had the saloon scene, the very AI kind of wonky saloon scene. He said, in my opinion, the horse with the X on it appears to have wings if you look closely, which I agree. The winged horse in Greek mythology is a Pegasus. Pegasus is also a constellation. In the final poem, the turning square could be the great square of Pegasus. Could Will's straight edge be the North Star? So I liked that because, I mean, like the constellation talk, obviously we have this like celestial theme throughout the book. But also just, when I initially saw that image as well, even though we're all in acknowledgement of that these are AI images, it doesn't mean that there can't be a clue, either that he manipulated an image to create a clue or he created a clue out of something that happened to show up in an image. So it did seem like those wings, if that's what those are, could be fair game. And I just liked that he took it a step further to connect it here. And then also tying in with the interest of the constellations that he had been looking into. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts.
You said Pegasus Square?
He said the turning square could be the great square of Pegasus.
You know what that is?
No.
It looks like the Pegasus constellation is made up of a square for part of it, is what I'm running into with a quick search here.
Okay.
We'll have to do a little bit more research into that. I really like constellation talk based on other things that we've talked about before. So this is definitely catching my attention.
Yeah, that was almost exactly what I was going to say. Is anything with constellations, I'm very intrigued by right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
definitely.
So we had talked initially, or I don't know, a few episodes back about the cross. I believe there's one star in the Jon Collins-Black AI image of him looking up into the sky and a bunch of stars, and there's one that's a cross, and then I don't remember the connection that we had to maybe a constellation that's also a cross. I'll have to think about that a bit more, but constellation wise, I like that a lot.
Especially with the North Star component. I mean, even in the acknowledgments, and he said like, "Thank you for being my North Star" about someone.
Yeah.
So I definitely think there's like a star, I would say specifically a North Star component here. So yeah, I thought this tied together a few, things that have kind of been lingering around, tied it together with the Pegasus connection.
Good.
Okay.
I like that.
Third one is from Hannah. I'm very excited about this one. So Hannah wrote in, this ties into the World's Fair. She was on a website that talks about World's Fair landmarks. I was on this website looking at all the USA landmarks related to the World's Fair. The first one in Knoxville caught my eye. It's the Sun Sphere. Interesting with the sun theme as well as gold, so I kept reading. I stumbled upon this site. It's a site that talks about the Sun Sphere in Knoxville. This is listed as one of the fun facts. The Rubik's Cube made its debut at the 1982 World's Fair. The world's largest Rubik's Cube, a gift from the Hungarian government, is on display inside the Knoxville Convention Center. I cross-checked which chapter correlated with our Mr. Rubik quote and found it was chapter 7, which also references Amelia/World's Fair, etc. That theme is explore more.
Ooh.
So I know we love a World's Fair connection.
Yes.
And I was very enthused that this includes sun, sphere, and we have a meaning potentially for why we had this Rubik's quote included in the book. Because I do feel like a lot of the quotes have tied into World's Fair connections in one way or another. I mean, obviously, World's Fair can get pretty worldly, so there's some stretches there, but there have been some very strong connections between the quotes and different World's Fairs. So this one in particular was very exciting. I'm glad she made this connection and was willing to share it with us and let us pass it along to our listeners.
Can you read the first part of that email again?
Yes, this ties into the World's Fair. I was on the website looking at the landmarks. So she was looking at all the USA landmarks related to the World's Fair.
Mm-hmm.
The first one in Knoxville caught my eye. It's the Sun Sphere. Interesting with the sun theme as well as gold, so I kept reading. And then that
Knoxville.
site listed the fun fact.
Interesting. Okay. That is a brand new World's Fair connection for us, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
And the connection to the Rubik's Cube is very pertinent, I think. Huh.
Yeah. I guess overall, like, I would say overall, I've been focused on Pokemon Box, so I'm trying not to get too skewed into the lion's share. But I think when I do think through the lion's share, I'm like either all in on the quotes or I'm just like not thinking about the quotes at all, depending on what I'm working on. And I just think it's a good reminder to really be keeping these quotes top of mind in how they can be connecting to some greater themes throughout the book. Because we have found enough strong connections. It's not like, I mean, we all know the quotes were not picked at random, but I think they're more intertwined into our greater mural quilt weaving tapestry than what I maybe originally thought.
Okay. Good. Yeah, those are some very... I guess the Pegasus square is something more specific that we can look into. The overall reminder of the quotes and this World's Fair connection I like a lot as well.
Yeah. So we've had a lot of goodies in the mailbag. Thank you for everybody who's been sending in, and we will continue to try to keep responding.
Okay. Just want to pause the podcast now so I can start thinking about some of these things.
Yeah, I'm actually like, I'm trying to force myself to pay attention to what you guys are saying because I'm starting to think about some things I want to look into right now.
Write them down, Cody.
Yeah,
yes.
I need to write them down.
Cool. All right, good pulls from the mailbag, and yeah, I'll be helping Bryn catch up this week as well. So thank you everybody, and apologies for being slow on response, but I'll be in the studio for the next couple weeks here. So
Nice.
all right, should we go into Discord detectives? All right, I've got 2 Discord detectives today.
Ooh.
First one is from
Nice.
Reddit, from Dr. Beat 14, the Reddit/r treasure inside. It's always a thing that catches my eye is talking about the road mapping, since we talk about that quite a bit here. I thought he or she had some good points that I just wanted to bring to attention. So it's kind of more inspirational, nothing specific here, but I wanted to read through a couple of these. They said, I feel like I've gotten a bunch of quote unquote directions to follow, but without a starting point, it's hard to know what the hell to do. Sorry.
Oh.
Now this podcast is explicit. It's hard to know what to do with it all. Does anyone have ideas on a place to start? And then here's a few ideas. Start at the beginning of the book and go in chapter order, or find the first clue there, which may lead to another chapter, eventually using all 23 chapters in part 1. Another idea is start at the beginning of JCB's life and path, moving westward, using his stories as he did in his life. Another idea is to start at the beginning of America and move forward with American history, such as Native Americans, Spanish settlers, Columbus, the Revolution, westward expansion, civil rights, space exploration, which I like that one very much, actually. It's kind of like a timeline, which would be an interesting approach. Start at the end. It's just messed up like that. Or start wherever he started for the Forrest Fenn hunt. But that's doubtful. We can even know, since the Forrest Fenn box in this hunt would likely be in that place. So just kind of this brainstorm of how do we even come up with a starting place if we are going to go down this roadmap approach, I think is good food for thought to start thinking about different ideas on where do we even start. Because this is something, Cody's brought up quite a bit, is what's even a clue? Coming up with a starting point would be super helpful. And it doesn't seem like anybody has a clear picture on that yet. So anyway, I thought this was useful. It sparked some inspiration for me, at least, to think about what is our starting point for this roadmap approach if we want to keep going down that road. Any thoughts?
It's a little overwhelming because my default is certainly just to start with chapter 1 and kind of work through the book in order, chapter by chapter. So I don't like thinking that there would have to be potentially a different way to have to think through that because it feels overwhelming enough to just do it in a linear way through the book. But it is valuable to think that through because it certainly doesn't have to be laid out that way.
Right. I think that's why I gravitated towards the timeline approach, just because there's, the chapters aren't necessarily in order of a timeline at all. But that does seem like, theme-wise, I do like the American history approach. And even taking that a bit farther, going into some of the later chapters, like 21, which has some of the Greek mythology stuff that might be challenging. But I think the timeline approach with the American history, Native Americans, Spanish settlers, Columbus, the Revolution, westward expansion, civil rights, space exploration does seem to fit a narrative that the stories focus on, certainly in the book. So I like that one quite a bit, actually.
Yeah, it would almost be like the first puzzle that you need to solve because he tied the chapters together through kind of like his personal anecdotes or just like things that he was able to draw connections from between the chapters. And so then it's like, well, then unscramble that connections that he's tied into a chronological order, which is an interesting thought.
Yeah, I think my favorite of those was like the same as what you thought, Blake. The chronological order particularly possibly American history. My concern is that one of the first chapters I thought of was the Angkor Wat, Tuyet Nuyet,
Mm-hmm.
which would be hard to pull in there. And then knowing which chapters we need to pull in or don't need to pull in, I may be taking it too literally, but I always keep thinking back to that the quote he had saying that almost every you'll find a clue in almost every chapter.
Right.
So something has to be left out. And how do you, again, if you're taking it as literally as I am, something has to be left out. And then how do you distinguish which one gets left out and which one don't? Maybe if it doesn't reference something in America, it gets left out.
Interesting.
Does Picasso? Oh gosh, this is going to be not good for me. I think Picasso was in Europe. Was he not? Or was Picasso, did he live in the US for a while? Should I know this?
You're setting us all up for a big trap, Cody. Is he not Spanish?
Anyway, oh yeah, South America, right?
No. European. Oh gosh.
European Spanish.
If there's an awkward cut here, this is why.
Yeah. We have to edit this out.
No, I'm pretty sure he's Spanish. He's Spanish.
I was sick that day in 3rd grade.
But it says he did later lived in France for the majority of his adult life. So
that's what I thought.
European, you were right on for that.
So another chapter that would be pretty far removed from any American history. And I'm sure there's more than that, but I like the thought process. And yeah, that's one of the big challenges is figuring out just if you're buying into the roadmap idea, where to start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the other one to think about is the beginning of JCB's life and path. So just focusing on his personal anecdotes as another way to approach this. I think there's enough of them in there, particularly at the beginnings and ends of chapters, that might be reasonable as well. So,
were there any that were outside of North Carolina and California that you can think of off the top of your head?
Not off the top of my head.
I mean, it could be more of just a way to rearrange the chapter. Like, I guess maybe even if you take location out of it, like if you're just rearranging it by sequence of his life in the anecdotes, then you would still have other locations to be working with outside of, I mean, like if you change the order of the chapters, you would have different locations in a different order, not just necessarily the locations of his anecdotes.
But at least a way to arrange the content in some reasonable manner. Even if it's not the anecdotes that you're referencing specifically, that could be reasonable as well. All right, enough fluff. I think a lot of our stuff has been thought exercises more so than hard clues. Got one interesting nugget for you, particularly, Bryn, on the second Discord detective here. Ooh. This is from Waldo Wall from the Calazar's Discord. The Pokemon story mentions 3 different Mars rovers: Sojourner, Spirit, and Curiosity. How do you like that?
I don't like it.
You don't like it?
No, because I really like that New Horizons connection from the Amelia Earhart chapter, but I also am a firm believer that there's separation between part 1 and part 2.
Right.
How do I come to terms with both of those?
Yeah, you could use one or the other.
I guess I would argue that doesn't fit the theme of the chapter.
Okay.
I think that I would say that's just a coincidence based off of like the types of names that these have been named.
I mean, Sojourner is definitely the odd one out there, right?
Yeah.
That was pretty much my exact thought, was Curiosity, and what was the other one?
It's Spirit, Curiosity, and Sojourner.
Curiosity and spirit.
But
I could brush those off, but
if they're looking for like words to describe like exploration and like, I don't know, I could see
yeah.
it. I could see it. Plus, I feel like I have a very strong solve for for it as well, which I don't want to lose hope on. So, yeah, I don't know. I think I would lean towards coincidence mostly because if this was past and future box, I would be bought in.
Okay.
But I don't see that tying in, at least with the approach that I've been taking. It doesn't feel like it fits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's that look, Cody?
That's a look of my other thought was I could brush it off a lot easier if there was like 20 or 30 different named Mars rovers, but quick Google search shows like 5 main ones, and it's 3 of them.
Right. So that was going to be my counterpoint as well. Opportunity as another rover. And that would be probably the easiest word in my mind to fit in to the story.
That's a good point.
So
yeah,
why wouldn't JCB fit that one in as well if this was meant to be a clue? So anyway, I thought it was a cool, as you guys are saying, coincidence. I think I also agree that it's probably a coincidence, but the Sojourner, I think, has been under a lot of discussion. The Sojourn, why that is included in the story, since it's kind of a bit of an obscure word. You're talking about exploration and a journey, Bryn, so it does make sense with the context of the chapter. But because opportunity is missing there, and that seems like there would be a lot of opportunity to put that into the story,
Mm-hmm.
that does have a strike against it, I would say.
Yeah, it looks like there's another one called Perseverance too, which would not be difficult to add in there.
On that long journey that Jon Collins-Black took with the hemmed-in forest, that would certainly fit in there too. So yeah, I agree. Maybe not, but I thought it was a cool finding that was reported out.
Yeah.
So
I mean, this is getting ahead to like into our main meat and potatoes content here, but I will just say, like, I think it's just when I was working on my solve on the plane, that's like I kept checking so many boxes of like, this checks out, this all builds on it, is snowballing, I like it. And then you can just like come back to your very first aspect of a solve and be like, well, you could also interpret it a totally different way and just go down a whole different path. And I think that's so much of what you see in Golden Greed is just like, I mean, there's varying degrees of the legitimacy of these solves, but it's like everybody interprets it in a different way.
mm-hmm.
They all make sense. They all are pretty good. So it's just hard to like, I don't know. It's hard to get to a point where I feel like I'm ready to go look, because you always have all these other ideas floating around in the back of your head that also seem potentially legit.
Confirmation bias, which Jon Collins-Black warns us against, certainly.
Yeah, but like at a certain point, you kind of just have to like
Right.
trust your solve. Otherwise, I'm never gonna go look.
That's right. There's a happy medium in there that I'm hoping, for each of the small boxes and the lion's share, trying to connect the boots on the ground clues as confirmers to things that you might not have linked just from the armchair solve should hopefully be very clear.
Mm-hmm.
All right, should we dive into today's content, which is our review of Gold and Greed, the new Forrest Fenn treasure hunt documentary on Netflix that was released late last month in March. You guys have a chance to watch it recently?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Overall impressions, was it enjoyable?
I very much enjoyed it.
I thought it was really fun. Yes, agreed.
Yeah.
And yeah, coming from this outside of the Forrest Fenn hunt, I know we're all aware of the Forrest Fenn hunt, but never participated in that. I don't think any of us have thrill of the chase or any of the follow-up books or anything like that. So we're kind of going into it blind. Besides what we've learned doing this treasure hunt, where a lot of the hunters that are involved in there's treasure inside also were Forrest Fenn hunters. So you hear bits and pieces of different stories and different rumors and things like that. So granted, a documentary out of Netflix isn't also the end-all be-all for facts either. It's also for entertainment value, but I thought it was very informative and told some interesting stories, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
And so our intent, when you say we're going to be doing a review of that documentary, what we're trying to do is kind of find takeaways from the documentary that are or could be applicable to the TTI hunt. We're not necessarily doing a review of the documentary in general.
We're not film critics.
We're not going to give it a whole tomato or a rotten tomato.
That's right. All right, where do we want to start? Oh, go ahead, Bryn.
I was just going to say, I'll start out by saying that from watching this, it really seems like the hunt took on a whole life of its own that Forrest Fenn did not anticipate. Obviously, like his health coming around and then the media that he was getting. And it makes me very thankful that Jon Collins-Black has taken the approach of like, I'm putting this book out there. I will not be providing any additional context, because I think that just has made it, from watching the show, it just made it like so overwhelming. And also it's like, how do you keep up with that? Like, it's hard enough to keep up with the Discord or the Reddit, like whether or not you choose to do that. But it's like, if JCB was out floating around providing these interviews and mysterious clues intentionally, it would just be, it's hard enough to try to dissect the book that we have, and then to be adding in all these extra layers feels impossible. So I'm very thankful we're not in that situation.
Yeah, I'm glad we're not having to run facial recognition software on JCB interviews.
It was pretty cool, though.
It was cool.
I thought the Justin Posey approaches, so he's one of the main searchers that's highlighted in this Forrest Fenn documentary. I thought learning about some of the more creative approaches that he took, even if they're maybe not as applicable, or maybe they are, to this hunt. So yeah, like you're saying, the facial emotion detection tool that he built, where one of the early interviews on where Forrest Fenn is talking about Yellowstone, and Justin Posey flags that as something his facial cues were a little bit different there to show nervousness, supposedly. That was super cool, I thought. And then the other cool thing I really liked was the bronze sniffing dog. So he trained his pet dog to sniff for bronze, and supposedly you can train dogs to sniff out certain metal types. I thought that was a really cool approach.
Yeah, I thought his approaches were really cool. I bet he could figure out how to get my Python script to work up to 6 characters.
Right. Gotta optimize your code, Cody.
So his dog can sniff out metal underground. Our dog, if we drop some food on the ground, you have to point it out to him. Sometimes he'll step on it first, and then you have to point it out. So, a little envious.
Other takeaways you want to start with?
So it sounded like, based off of what they said in the show, there was maybe about 300,000 people searching for Forrest Fenn's treasure.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I was just gonna ask, like, do we have any ballpark? I like, do we know how many copies of this treasure inside have been sold? Just a quick Google search, I wasn't able to find that, but I don't know if either one of you have done a little bit more research.
I've not done research. I've just in my mind thinking about the initial print run, I think 20,000 copies or so. And then knowing that there's been, I think, up to 4 additional print runs at this point, makes me guess there's somewhere on the order of magnitude of 100,000 copies sold, would be a guess. So probably not quite up to Forrest Fenn level. And I think that brings up a point that was also of interest from the documentary. Was it seemed like the Forrest Fenn hunt was kind of a slower start, is at least what my takeaway was. And there's kind of different levels that are happening where the book is released. There's some, New Mexico local interviews happening, and then there's like a bigger Newsweek article. And that kind of seemed to be the first wave. I don't really know the timing. I didn't look up when that Newsweek article came out. And then after the first death from the Forrest Fenn hunt, that added kind of an additional viral factor to it, where that got a lot of news coverage. And then it seemed like there was a second wave of people that started the hunt. So
And that was like 2017, wasn't it? So
yeah.
this was, years after the hunt started.
Exactly. So that was interesting to me, is understanding the wave of how the search kind of grew, particularly based on bad press that's coming out of it. And they say all press is good press, right? Unfortunately. But I think Jon Collins-Black has done, I believe, Good Morning America once. So that was right out of the gates, and kind of grew it through that. But unfortunately, if there's, bad press that's coming out of that, that might bring more people to the hunt based on what we learned from the Forrest Fenn hunt.
TTI also has the unique factor of having 5 treasures in one book. So it'll be interesting to see if kind of the number of people interested starts snowballing once one treasure is found and two treasures are found. And I'm sure that the duration between when the treasures are found will affect that too. But I could see that kind of creating a snowball effect, and it'll definitely, reignite people's interest in it, I'm sure.
No, that's a good point, and very positive in terms of we don't want anybody to get hurt from this hunt. So if it can grow, like you're saying, Cody, from a find of the first box, that would be way more positive than the Forrest Fenn hunt was in terms of garnering traction.
Yeah. Especially if we don't have an understanding of what this clue is that comes with the treasure, but if that person were to like share that clue or something, and then the news story is a treasure's been found and it's gonna help you find this other greater treasure, I could definitely see that bringing more people along for the ride.
So just throw it out there. If one of the small boxes is found, we'd be more than happy to do the interview where that clue is shared.
Please.
One other thing we should have mentioned, I just thought of, we should have mentioned this at the top of the segment, but in the Golden Greed documentary, at the end of the documentary, it's revealed that within the documentary, there's another hunt, which is interesting, and also something we're not really going to touch on during our podcast here. We're staying laser focused.
Blue eyes,
yes.
Laser focused. Yeah, the map Beyond the Map's Edge is the new hunt that came out of this documentary that's being hosted by Justin Posey. And it's also mentioned in the documentary that there's clues associated with that hunt that Netflix had nothing to do with. It's all the way that Justin Posey set up his rooms that he's being interviewed in his house that contain clues. So, Netflix is saying they have nothing to do with this. It was all Justin's idea. So that's something interesting, certainly, to garner a rewatch, is to seek out what those clues are. Certainly, there's a very clear scene of him like changing the clock before one of his first interviews, and then he has all his monitors behind him during some of his interview segments that has different pictures that I thought was pretty interesting. But yeah, like Cody said, I don't think we're going to be focusing on that. There's treasure inside the Unofficial podcast, not let's say like Calazar's is a more general treasure hunting channel, and they're covering this quite a bit right now. I don't think we have plans to do that at the moment.
hopefully it's taken some heat off my competition to the Pokemon box.
That's right. A little carrot is distracting everybody else.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting timing. I was telling Cody, like, it's pretty crazy that both of these, like, pretty mainstream big hunts have come out really close. I mean, what, within 6 months of each other?
Mhm.
It seems kind of wild. And I'm curious, like, are they both like, dang, that timing kind of sucks? Like, now it's kind of spreading the treasure hunting community thin, or are they excited because it kind of brings more attention and they can kind of get the audience from both? I don't know. I think if it was me and I was Jon Collins-Black and I had just released my book and now this Netflix thing's coming out, I'd be like, well, poo. Like, this is taking away some of my momentum, because I do think a lot of people have maybe gotten to a point now within a few months where they're like, I don't want to say frustrated, but they kind of feel like, ugh, I'm not getting anywhere with the solve, and they've maybe hit a dead end. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to go work on this for a little bit. So it's just funny that they both came out at similar times.
Yeah, I think a rising tide raises all ships, right? I don't think the treasure hunting community is saturated by any means. So people that start doing heavy research into Beyond the Map's Edge are certainly going to figure out that there's treasure inside Hunt as well, and vice versa, I think. So
yeah.
And the second point
maybe
is,
I'm just,
yeah, go ahead.
oh, maybe I'm just not thinking of it in like a long enough timeline of, like, I think we're all wanting to like solve some of these things this spring, and maybe that's just not realistic. And we need to be thinking, this is a few, I mean, 5 on Jon Collins-Black's side, 1 over here, like 6 hunts that we just need to be thinking maybe years worth of work. And so in that context, being released a few months apart, I guess, isn't that detrimental.
Yeah, in the grand scheme, thinking about Jon Collins-Black's comments about releasing clues after 8 years, like, he probably doesn't care too much about a second hunt being released. Exactly what you're saying, Bryn. The time scale is, negligible in terms of he thinks his hunt's going to be going on for a number of years. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to ask Jon Collins-Black that question, whoever has the next interview with him. That'd be great. Anything very specific that you got out of the documentary that was super helpful? I have one nugget, certainly.
I think my nugget was the same as yours, and you told it to me beforehand, so I'm not going to steal it.
I've got some more fluff, and then yeah, I think most of mine's fluff.
That's fine. Yeah, we didn't really plan out rhyme or reason for this discussion, so I'll just say it because it's at the beginning of the documentary, like in the first 5 minutes, I think. The thing I found the most interesting that I didn't know, and maybe it's very obvious if you've read Thrill to Chase or seen Forrest Fenn interviews, but it's mentioned that for the Forrest Fenn poem, the clues that are in that poem are actually in consecutive order, which I had not realized before. So that is something tangible that we can take. And in my mind, I'm assuming because Jon Collins-Black has the Forrest Fenn box, for that Forrest Fenn box, the way he structured his poem as well means that Jon Collins-Black's Forrest Fenn poem is also in consecutive order. So I thought that was something very tangible to take away from the documentary.
Yeah, I guess that was my assumption for the Forrest Fenn box, but I do think then this just really doubles down on making that seem like that is how you should be approaching the poem. So that feels good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I had assumed that both the Forrest Fenn poem and JCB's poem were in order, but I guess I didn't know that as a fact until seeing that documentary, at least for the Forrest Fenn one. Along that same vein, I didn't realize the Forrest Fenn one, he said there are 9 clues. Like, that's a fact. I didn't know that. I didn't have the thrill of the chase. I just had, what do we have? Like a copy of the poem. I remember seeing the poem on a paper at some point.
Mm-hmm.
No, GCB doesn't, if I remember correctly, doesn't specifically reference 9 clues or not 9 clues in his poem.
Mm-mm.
So I don't know if that could be a clue as to the number of clues or a clue as to not knowing the number of clues. Probably, like most of the things I say, creates more questions than answers, but it is another connection to something specific that I had not known about the Forrest Fenn poem.
So, in Thrill of the Chase, did Forrest Fenn say there are 9 clues in this poem?
Or in an interview? It was definitely stated at some point as a fact.
Yeah, it was
in the documentary.
It was unclear where that information came from, but it was like during one of the Good Morning America interviews that they show the footage on. They'd say, "Okay, so here's another clue along with the 9 that are in the poem," because Forrest Fenn starts giving clues in his monthly segments on Good Morning America.
And so GCB obviously did an extensive amount of research on the Forrest Fenn poem, so he would definitely have known there's 9 clues in there. So interesting that he would not, maybe interesting that he would not say that in the narrative of his poem, or maybe you would believe that we should assume that there's 9 clues in his poem as well.
I mean, in Forrest Fenn's poem, was there just like 9 stanzas, and that's where I guess I'm curious where the 9 is coming from.
I don't think there were 9 stanzas.
Okay, so then it feels like that's something that Forrest would have had to have said, to say there's 9 clues in this poem.
Right.
Yeah.
Which then kind of makes me interested in the word search and past and future box saying there's 5 clues in the word search.
Yeah, I guess we're saying we don't know if it came from the Thrill of the Chase or from like a Forrest Fenn interview, but it was known.
Yeah, so like I guess what I'm trying to, like, if it came from Forrest Fenn and it's not just then the community saying we have identified what we think are the 9 clues and potentially omitting something else, but yes. Interesting.
So the Netflix documentary has kind of 4 main characters within the documentary, and I think it was very enlightening and good lessons for us, as you said earlier, Bryn, you alluded to earlier, looking at the way the 4 searchers or search groups narrowed in on particular clues and, like you're saying, seemed reasonable in each approach. So we had the Hearsts, which had the clues that were kind of close to them in Wyoming. We had Justin Posey, which took kind of a more scientific approach, let's say, and went with the facial recognition software, which really led him down the Yellowstone path, which is amazing. And then we have Cynthia, and I can't remember the name of the last gentleman with his family, but Lou, that's right. Lou had like very coincidental connections to that piece of land he was looking at, with the ownership, the names of the owners of that land being very coincidental, as to, it seemed like a slam dunk almost. And knowing that all can't be correct is great information.
It's just scary though to like see the connections that each team or individual makes, and then it's like, well, this has to be me right now, right? Like these things that I feel like are so perfect in my solve, I'm gonna be the next Lou. Just trying to make things connect that aren't the real solve, and he's solving the box in the sky as a pilot, and I'm just sitting back and coach doing my solve. Yeah, it was discouraging to watch in that way, to be like, man, only one person can be right here. I mean, I guess a couple ended up at Yellowstone. I mean, within these obviously a lot of people ended up at Yellowstone.
Mm-hmm.
Cynthia ended up at Yellowstone because Forrest Fenn told her to. So I don't know. It is remarkable how many different directions and the coincidences that can be made through these solve approaches.
Mhm.
So I'm trying not to be discouraged by it.
Yeah, that kind of segues into my thing. I wanted to highlight most of all of my notes, and it's going to be pretty pessimistic. So brace yourself. I've had this nagging feeling of like, so I'm not, this is pretty much my first foray into treasure hunting, and I'm not sure what the expectations are for like what, how close really a final correctly solved clue is supposed to get you or what information it's supposed to get you. And I've had this concern because I'm very like analytical person. I think I'm worried that I'm expecting it to be more of like cryptography or like a logic puzzle than it's actually going to be.
Mhm.
And that the outcome is going to be like, oh, I know exactly where to go now, like armchair solve type thing, but like very confident armchair solve. And the Forrest Fenn thing makes me worried that there are there could be 50 answers that would still mesh or meet the criteria of the final, like you've correctly solved everything there is to solve from the book, but there's still just a million different ways to interpret that information.
Mhm.
I told Bryn early on in this process, I said that my concern was that like when you solve a GCB, like you've solved everything there is in the book, that the outcome of that could still just be like as cryptic as a Forrest Fenn poem. And she's like, I think she said no, because GCB says he's going to get you within, whatever it was of the treasure box. But then my rebuttal to that is like, I feel like Forrest Fenn would have said, hey, this poem's everything you need to get within 50 meters of the treasure. And it's just, I'm a little concerned that there's a lot of metaphor and like the Forrest Fenn one. I'm a believer that it was the 9 Mile Hole thing in Yellowstone. I think Justin Posey kind of covered that in the documentary. I had actually looked at some blog thing many months ago now at this point that was also walking through in even more detail, like exactly how this person that was doing the blog after the thing had been found and a lot of the information was released, exactly how the poem, the Forrest Fenn poem, lined up with the actual solve, the 9 Mile Hole solve. And the problem is I had seen other potential solves for the Forrest Fenn one that made as much sense or more sense. So it's like, it's not necessarily a logic thing. You have to like logically narrow it down to a handful of places, but there's still some like luck involved or whatever you want to call it. Have to just some like right place, right time. I don't know.
But
Like I said, my brain works differently, and I want it to be like, oh, I've solved this equation. Here's the answer, and I'm worried it's not going to be like that, and that's just
I mean, the thrill of the chase was, or it was a book. So I think the intent was you use the additional context of the book to apply that to the poem. So like if you were to be learning about him, like the picture of him or his father like at the specific rock, and like if you can put all the pieces together of how does this poem make sense within the context of Forrest Fenn's life, like I get that's still very cryptic and can be interpreted different ways, but I think that was the intent more so than just like what are the random ways that you can apply these metaphors in the poem to different locations. Um, Also, Jon Collins-Black has told us that there's potentially at least one box that you could just find from your house and just go and collect it and come home. So I think if we have one that can be, solved that thoroughly from afar, I think the other ones would not be dramatically different than that approach.
yeah. And I guess
Just in
I
like
should say I'm definitely on board for like needing to go boots on the ground, but I'd like for them to be once your boots on the ground, it to be like
confirmation.
landmarks or confirmations that are a little bit more substantial than a lot of the Forest Fen ones that seemed like it matched a lot of other potential boots on the ground areas. So I don't know. I'll be very interested to see. Again, we've talked about this before, but once one is found, I think it'll be very telling as to kind of what to expect for the other ones.
I'm certainly most interested in boots on the ground experience. I would like to go collect my box. I don't want to go somewhere and be like, oh my gosh, I gotta go home and like do a couple more months of research and come back. I don't know. That just sounds, not that I'm not up for like that adventure, but just especially for Pokemon box, like that's a long ways to go. Just the logistics of that is just, that's not what I want to be doing necessarily.
Yeah. Well, another thing that's actually notable and kind of ties the two together and is a good takeaway from the documentary is how close that box was to not just like civilization in general, a major roadway. You know, when you think hiding a treasure box from the general population and making sure no one's going to stumble upon it, in my mind, it's very much more hidden than it was shown in the documentary. And it turns out, especially, I guess I always picture the boxes bigger than they actually are, but a small box like that, it can be 50 feet from a main road and no one's going to run into it. So I'm kind of recalibrating how I'm picturing the box relative to main populated areas.
Yeah, I think, I mean, Jon Collins-Black in one of his interviews is asked like, oh, do you have a map marking where they are? And he's like, well, no, I know exactly where they are. And so I think they're just in like very specific spots that, like he said, no one's gonna stumble upon them. But I think there's plenty of land that's close to a road or a trail that no one just would happen to just veer off into for no other reason.
Yeah. I'll do my one other thing I want to talk about and get all my bummer stuff out of the way. The other thing I just wanted to talk about is just I felt very, I guess, sad or empathetic during a lot of the show, a lot of the documentary. And I guess me naturally, I have a really easy time just understanding. To me, this is a game. Like it's we're doing this for fun. If all 5 of the boxes were found tomorrow, I'd be like, oh dang it. But I'd be just like super interested to know where, and like it wouldn't have a huge negative effect on my life. And I feel like they talk a lot about people have died trying to find it. And that's obviously terrible. But it was an interesting glimpse into like how other people's lives were also like really negatively affected, which was rough to see. And I'm glad that JCB talks so much about confirmation bias and just really urges people to avoid it as much as possible. And I think it's a hard thing to do, but I think that the Netflix documentary served as a really good reminder of like why it's so important to remember this is a game. At least to me, this is the game. The chances of any one individual finding the treasure is just astronomically low. You're doing it for fun, not for financial gain, not for fortune and fame. I don't know. I just thought it was that it's so much fun to do, and I'm having such a good time talking with you guys. It was tough to then see the other side of that, and I am really hopeful that because JCB had said he's definitely going to give the solutions away, I feel like that was a lot of the reason why it was a tough pill for people to swallow, and why things kind of got negative for a lot of people towards the end. So I'm hoping a lot of that's going to be avoided in the TTI hunt because we're going to get some closure, right?
Yeah, it's frustrating. Even the Netflix documentary is still speculative on where the site was. You know, Justin Posey has that picture overlay that seems to fit nicely with the log and the stick crossing. It looks pretty promising, but there's still no closure officially on the hunt solve. And this isn't unique to the Forrest Fenn. We've talked about this earlier, but the search for the golden horse, that one treasure hunt in the late 80s, mid to late 80s that had the book and had the video that both had separate clues that come to one solve. There's still not a released solve for that. It was all under NDA or copyright or whoever, Dr. Krypton wrote that or set up that solve, and it was never released because the rights of it were given to this company that didn't want to release it or went defunct. I'm not sure. But that does not help us very much in terms of learning about how to solve these hunts. From your perspective, Cody, from a first-time treasure hunter, it's like, well, there's not that much to learn from. I think probably there is if we dive into some other historical hunts, figuring out how those were solved and ones that do have solutions. But, a couple of these big ones that don't have a satisfying solution, quote unquote, it's not helpful. So certainly JCB's hunt with the publication of the solves after the fact, let's hope that comes to fruition.
Yeah.
And hopefully
I need
not.
that.
Yeah, if I need it to. Exactly.
I think part of the fear, I would think, of revealing your solve is that. So I think you talked about this early on, Cody, is like someone else could have almost a better solve than your solve to a different location.
Yeah.
And I think that could be a whole new can of worms as far as controversy around an ending of a hunt. He could release, well, I've said this, which means this, and it leads me here. And someone else could say, well, I've done it a better way and it led me somewhere else. That's unfair. So I could see there's still not being total resolve with, I don't know, with a solve being revealed. So I'm very curious just to see it all come together.
Yeah. I'm just one of those people who just wants, at the end of the day, I just want everyone to be happy. There'd be no controversy. I'm very anti-drama. I just want to have fun and play what in my mind is a game with everyone.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think part of the drama too is just the shock of nobody knows when it's going to be found. And so it was just the shock of like, well, now it's suddenly over and nobody was prepared for that. And I totally, like, I had the feeling when Blake was talking about the person who thought they found the Pokemon box that was confiscated. Like, it's shocking because you're like, you dedicate so much time and energy to something. And then if it's just all of a sudden gone and you weren't prepared for that to be over, I can see how that like has an emotional toll on people as well.
Yeah, it'll be cushioned a little bit because there's 5 boxes, right? But if it's the Pokemon box that you've been working on, it's gonna hit home pretty harshly.
If it's past and future, Blake's logging off.
I'm gonna log off.
I mean, I just want to get to a point, I guess for me with Pokemon Box right now, like I just want to get to a point where I feel like I have a full solve. Mm-hmm. I can have an answer for everything. Mm-hmm. I feel good about it and I want to go look. And if I don't find it, fine. And if it's totally somewhere else, fine. But I just feel like for me, the game for me is I want to be able to check all the boxes and feel like it all checks out in a way that I can make sense of. So that is my goal at the moment.
Yeah, so there's certainly something satisfying of going, cradle to grave here on a solve. And at least you gave it a full effort at least once before it's found.
Yeah. I don't want to have it be found before I feel like I at least had a chance.
Right.
I've mentioned before, I would also get a lot of joy out of once someone finds a box and the solve is revealed, if like any little aspect of the solve is something that we had talked about and identified, just knowing that even if they never didn't get it from us, just knowing that we were on the right track in some way, in some little point, some little way, would just like be really cool to know.
Get a little bit of partial credit on the test here would be satisfying for us. Yes.
Blake, you mentioned that in the documentary he showed the trees in the clearing area and overlaid the photo over the actual foliage. Mm-hmm. Was it in the documentary, or Brent, did you tell me this separately about the soil samples?
Blake mentioned it. I thought it was going to be in the documentary because of Blake mentioning it, so I was surprised that it wasn't. So you must have read about that elsewhere, Blake.
I think I did, unless I dreamed it, but I believe it was on Discord, the Calazar's Discord somewhere, that there was mention that Justin Posey had taken some soil samples of the site he thought it was and looked for increased levels of metal content that would be assumed from, weather and things leaching small metal particulates, either probably from the outside of the bronze box into the soil over those 10 years that it was sitting there. And I think the result was that I've seen, or at least read on Discord, there was like 10x the amount of metal particulates in that area that was sampled where Justin Posey thought the box was, compared to, control samples around that area. So that was another confirmer potentially of the correct spot of the Forrest Fenn box. And maybe we'll get more information on that in the future, but that's at least what I had read online.
Yeah, that would be huge.
Yeah, it doesn't seem unlikely based on Justin's more scientific approaches and funding levels that he can throw at this, and definitely his obsession with it as well. I think something that I would have liked a bit more information on, and I think it's probably worth a second watch for me, is the story of Justin Posey's brother committing suicide. And it was a little bit unclear, like, if that was driven by the obsession with the hunt, or if there was other things happening in his brother's life that caused that. That was a little bit unsatisfying to me in terms of the information provided. And certainly that's like, obviously very, very personal stuff, but it was included in the documentary. But that was shocking to me because it seemed like Justin, like, hosting the second hunt, his dedication to the Forrest Fenn box, like, that was kind of a shocker to me. That part of the story is, how is he so optimistic about this hunt still?
Yeah, there was a few things in the documentary that I feel like just like very much were just blazed by and just not enough context, which I guess I understand if they have to edit things down. But that was not a full story there. But I guess I hadn't considered what you're talking about with him still wanting to continue on that adventure for the next set of people, given what him and his family went through. That's a good point. I told Cody that I thought him and Justin would be good friends. As he was listing out his hobbies, I thought, this seems like someone Cody would be friends with.
All right, I get to be friends with Jon Collins-Black. You get to be friends with Justin Posey.
I want a treasure friend. I can't even be friends with Cynthia because she's already friends with K-Pro.
Can't be a copycat. You have to be friends with Lou. Sorry.
Lou.
Go touch snakes.
Gross. Yeah, his snake channel. Oof. No, thank you. Do we all have a favorite moment of the series?
Of the documentary?
Yeah. I definitely have one. I can go first.
I do too, yeah.
My very favorite part was what was the family's name?
The Hearsts.
The dad wearing the Dorito bags on his feet when they were searching in the snow because he didn't have waterproof footwear. I mean, I just loved that so much. Just, I feel like that their dedication and just like
ingenuity.
I mean, yeah, for me, I'd be like, well, I guess I'm just not going to go hunt right now because this is not the good weather and I don't have the appropriate gear to be doing this. And he's like, no, I'm putting Dorito bags on my feet.
That was awesome.
I thought that was great.
Yeah, my favorite part of the documentary was also Hearst associated when they started taking pictures of where they thought the treasure location was. And then they're like, there's the bear head right there. And then Netflix has to do like the graphic interface to show you where the bear head is because it's not very clear. Because I really liked the Hearst solve, right? The things I didn't like about it was the boulder on top of where they thought it was. I thought that's too much.
Yeah.
And then the bear head. But everything else I really liked about the Hearst solve, right? So I enjoyed the bear head solve, and I think I probably said out loud to the TV sitting by myself, I'm like, no, no. And just
Forrest Fenn. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Just the coincidence of them finding that bear head shaped rock that's pretty loose, and then they supposedly sent the email that night that Forrest Fenn announced that it was solved. I don't know how true that is, but if that was how the Netflix documentary described being true, that's crazy and very unfortunate.
Yeah, that hurts.
Yep.
Big oof.
Do you guys remember for the Forrest Fenn one, was it ever discussed if it was valid or not for it to be buried? Did he say this won't be buried?
Don't remember that. I don't
can't
remember what
either.
the parameters of the search were. That's a good question, Cody.
There was a lot of Netflix B-roll of shoveling earth. Not that that has any accuracy to the hunt, but
JCB never said we don't have to use dynamite.
Rocks are just big dirt.
Rocks are just big dirt.
I feel like it must not have been specified, or there's no way they would have been looking under that boulder.
Well, I noticed that they specifically, I referenced this earlier in the episode, that I think they specifically called it entombed instead of buried.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if that's why, because if Forrest Fenn had said it's not buried.
Yeah, let me just make one more Hearst point because it's coming up that I want to get off my chest. It seemed like Forrest Fenn had particular relationships with certain searchers. We see the one, with Cynthia kind of in the documentary where they're in constant contact. Hearst, I think, were working on that boulder for at least a year or two. And why
I think I said 2 years.
Forrest Fenn wouldn't give them information that it's not there is a bit confusing to me. If he's interacting at a very high level with some searchers and not with the Hearst for some reason.
Yeah, I hate that. And I think if we knew that type of stuff was happening with this hunt, I don't think I would be interested in this hunt. I know Cynthia says life's unfair, but I just feel like that if we're not all playing the game with the same set of rules, that's just not fun anymore. Like if someone else, I'm not going to call it cheating, but if you're playing the game in a different way and you're just getting an advantage that doesn't feel the same, it just doesn't feel like the same. It doesn't feel like a game anymore, I guess. Like Cody was saying, it's fun because it's a game and we're all working with the same clues, which I think is why it feels like such an exciting race because we're all doing the exact same thing. And so, yeah, it was like heartbreaking that they weren't able to get any indication and why or how Forrest chose who to let into the circle or who to email back. I don't know. It was like very deflating. And I think that family's obviously very upset by it. And I think that's justified. And I would be too.
Yeah, it's almost two different things, right? On one hand, there's like the Cynthia stuff where it seemed like she was getting, I mean, not like spoon fed directly inside information, but definitely like slightly more hints than other people, or getting more information than other people were. And that's one thing. But then I think what Blake's alluding to is like, it seems like that other family was probably sending Forrest Fenn emails at least periodically. And if he knew that they'd been working on that boulder for, they did it for 2 years, like after a month of that, if he's giving people hints, let them know they can stop working on that one.
Yes.
It almost seems cruel not to just be like, okay, focus your efforts elsewhere. Yeah, did not
All
like
right.
that.
We should end on a positive note somehow here.
What was your favorite part, Cody?
Oh, I didn't have it. I wasn't ready for that question. So now I'm trying to think. I think probably also the Dorito bag thing, just because that was so unexpected. just to cut to him pulling the Dorito bags out of his shoes.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, like, obviously these hunters were all picked because they had an interesting story to tell on Netflix, and that's why Netflix selected them. But it was very interesting to see how different personalities could approach the hunt in such different ways. I mean, we even see that with our group here. I think, like, I get very excitable and kind of my feet out from under me on some stuff and just let that momentum carry me. So I could very much be in the camp of the Hursts.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I resonated with them. I don't think I would be on the boulder for 2 years, but I don't know. Maybe that's what people say about me with my rips around the images. Maybe that is my boulder. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I liked their energy and their enthusiasm for the hunt.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other comments or questions? I think I got through everything that was on my chest, at least, about this documentary.
Check my
That's
notes
all I
real
got.
quick.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. It's 3 episodes, each about 45 minutes each, so it's not a huge commitment, and it's definitely an entertaining story. They set it up pretty interestingly that they really say they hint that the Hearsts are like gonna get it, and then they do the rug pull and bring in Jack Stoof at the end in the 3rd episode and show you that even though all of these people have convincing levels of solves, like none of these people actually found it. It's this kind of unknown person that ended up getting it. So again, a good lesson that no matter how dedicated you are, it's still somewhat random chance that you're going to be the finder, and someone else unknown that doesn't have an online presence or hasn't been in this case doesn't have an online presence is just going to go out and get the treasure, and that's it. So it's good lessons all around. Good perspective, I think, for a lot of folks here, including us.
Definitely.
Right.
Are you any of you guys? I know we're not participating in that hunt, at least at this point in time. Are you guys gonna try to keep up with it at all? I don't know. I mean, I haven't even looked to see if like there's discords and stuff like that, but I guess I'm just trying to not even think about it because I don't want to get lured in that direction.
Yeah.
Ditto.
I'm actively staying out of that. I don't want distractions. We'll see if it's still going after TTI is or not, but I don't know. Another Forrest Fenn poem, like I've stayed away from the Forrest Fenn poem already. The Posey one, I believe, is a poem as well. I haven't read it yet, but I'm in Cody's camp here. The metaphors and the poems just don't draw me in, I don't think. That's why I've gone to the word search, which is still unclear whether that's more of a solid solve versus a metaphorical or word association one as well. We'll find out once one's found. But yeah, the poems don't do it for me.
Fair enough.
Cool. I think that's an episode. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Hopefully one of the segments was helpful to you. But yeah, highly recommend checking out the Forrest Fenn documentary, Gold and Greed, on Netflix. Have a good night.
Searching for Horseshoes, that's funky. Left